Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Good morning, and thank you for being with us. Big, full show for us. It's Scavenger Hunt weekend for Georgia recruiting. We're all over that with Jeff Sentell, who joins us today. We have some schedule changes for some big Georgia spring sports. The continuing Diamond Dog series against Florida, the softball team in the NCAA Regional. We'll talk to you about some of that here over the course of our time together. Also, to kick things off here today, a lot of praise out there for a Georgia transfer who Georgia fans themselves also have big expectations for us. We'll talk about that. And a Georgia player has, what he thinks is a really fun idea for how the atmosphere at Sanford Stadium could get even better. So we'll have a couple of minutes worth of fun with that here today, too. So a lot to do today. Very busy show. Glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I always like it when I get to say this. It just seems so important. We begin today with breaking news. This coming via the weather and the spring sports. Obviously, it's a very big weekend for Georgia athletics when it comes to a spring sports standpoint. And we have a little bit of a schedule change because of what is likely a deluge of rain before it's all done tonight there in Athens. That means the Diamond Dogs, who got a nice win last night, we'll have more on that later on the show against Florida. Georgia perhaps playing for a chance to be a national seed in the upcoming NCAA tournament, the chance to maybe host a regional and a super regional. Got the win against Florida last night. Supposed to play tonight at 6, but the anticipation of rain is going to now move that up to a 1 p.m. start. Now, for a lot of folks maybe planning on attending that game, that's probably not great news, especially if you were coming from the Atlanta area. But if you try to keep it at the normal time, you're probably not getting the game in. So that has now changed. It's Georgia-Florida baseball today at 1 p.m. Want to make you aware of that. Also, the softball team hosting its NCAA regional in Athens here today. You've got a schedule change on that, too. So let me see. So Georgia's going to play at around 2:30. So the schedule here is noon start for, because remember, the regional's 4 teams. So it's a noon start today for Charlotte and Liberty. And then Georgia's going to play UNC Wilmington around 2:30. Obviously, that's at the conclusion of the first game. So that's an approximate game time. But 2:30, if you can't be there, you can watch it on ESPN Plus, the SEC Network Plus. I'm sure we'll have that. So it's Georgia baseball today at 1, Georgia softball this afternoon around to 2:30. Both those games kind of moved up here because of the threat of weather. That is breaking news, and that is my version of being sort of a newsman anchor here. I kind of like that every now and then. Not a bad way to do it. All right, we're going to talk more baseball here in a little bit because Georgia did get itself a nice win here last night. But prior to that, let's do what we get paid to do, which is talk to you about Georgia football here. And the growing excitement, the growing anticipation for a Georgia transfer, a guy that Georgia fans are certainly eager to see a lot of here this fall, but also the national media itself starting to notice some of this too. I was listening to something that Greg McElroy was saying the other day on his podcast. It's called Always College Football. And I'll say this, is that I do think, and, I can't really quite tell how Georgia fans feel about McElroy overall. He is a former Alabama quarterback, but he doesn't seem to be like, super Alabama-centric with his analysis or anything like that. I sort of view McElroy as a little bit of a rising star. I sort of view him as not quite the Kirk Herbstreit category, but in that next level below what the Herbstreits of the world might be, and Herbstreit may be kind of in a class by himself on that. McElroy is sort of like in that next group, if you will. And in some respects, I kind of like McElroy more than Herbstreit right now in terms of an analyst, because while Herbstreit sort of, kind of floats in and floats out, we don't hear a lot from Kirk during the offseason. McElroy is a little bit like what we do here in the fact that he's talking college football each and every day. He's a little bit more entrenched in the sport on a regular basis. And if you listen closely, what both guys say is someone like a Herbstreit or someone like a McElroy. I do think you can detect from McElroy a little bit of added wisdom from someone who kind of lives in the world of college football on a regular basis and not someone who's sort of floating in and floating out and essentially treating college football analysts as a part-time job at this stage of his career the way that Kirk Herbstreit is. But anyway, McElroy is doing his show, Always College Football, and he's ranking top running backs for the upcoming season. Now, Trevor Etienne, he only ranks Etienne 8th on his list in terms of best running backs in America. But in the blurb that he gave you on Etienne, Greg McElroy gives you a high level of praise for the Florida transfer here at Georgia for this season. And it echoes and mirrors, I think, a lot of what Georgia fans are thinking and saying, too. So from Always College Football, let's hear Greg McElroy, the ESPN analyst, talking about Trevor Etienne.
If you look at just how he played these last couple of years, man, he's going to be awesome. And I feel like the sky's the limit now with some of the pieces that they have around him. And if you look last year, if Georgia had that one Achilles heel, it was lack of a truly dynamic back in the backfield, which is rare for the Georgia Bulldogs, but Trevor Etienne might be able to provide that. 249 career carries, 1,472 yards and 14 touchdowns. It was really more of kind of a pass catcher last year, so his contributions to the passing game will be very beneficial to the Georgia Bulldogs as well.
So I love that, right? I mean, this is the time of year in which when you have that college football conversation, no matter who you're a fan of, you just want to have something to get excited about. You want to have something to sort of have fun looking forward to. That's what talking season is sort of about. And Georgia fans, even with all the success the program has enjoyed, they still want to do the same thing. We want to be eager in anticipation of seeing something we haven't seen. And so when Greg McElroy says this new running back is going to be awesome, this new running back, the expectations are so high, the sky's the limit. He could be as good as anything. He could be as good as anything you imagine or anything that you want. I believe that's absolutely true, and it's exciting. However, it also leads us to a discussion there as well where, if you want to be like completely honest here for a moment, Etienne, if he's going to be awesome at Georgia, it's fair to point out that he was good at Florida, but he wasn't exactly, I would say, awesome at Florida. That's not a criticism of Etienne. It's just hopefully a factual observation that when you say the sky's the limit for Etienne at Georgia, it's kind of fair to point out that he wasn't quite achieving those lofty expectations there at Florida. So, it becomes important to wonder, well, why will Etienne apparently be so much better here at UGA than he was at Florida? And I think the answer to that question is a couple of things. First of all, we believe that Etienne, who was good at Florida, can be even better than that at Georgia because he has the potential to be running behind a far better offensive line. And when you think about, oh, man, how good can Trevor Etienne be, or a couple of other transfers we may mention in a moment, how good can they be? I want you to always think about the value add that comes from having the kind of offensive line in place that Georgia could have. And that's why we put so much value on that line of scrimmage, because when you have the great offensive line, every skill position player is also potentially made better because of that, too. And that's one of the reasons why Trevor Etienne, who's probably south of awesome at Florida, has the potential to be, to use McElroy's word, awesome here at the University of Georgia, and why maybe the sky could be the limit. And if that's true, obviously, that's only going to attract more transfers potentially to Georgia in future years because they see a chance to be a part of an offense here at UGA that gives them more of a platform than their previous offense did. Here's the other thing, is the overall depth offensively that Etienne will have around him at Georgia is far better than anything that Florida is ever going to have. And so, therefore, the chance to kind of play off of other successful offensive pieces, that clearly gives Etienne an opportunity there as well. And it kind of leads me into a different discussion here for a moment, too, because one of the things we're kind of doing right now is we're sort of casting narratives and we're sort of saying, hey, here are the big storylines. Here's what this season is going to be. And when you think about a guy like Greg McElroy saying these really nice things about Trevor Etienne, I think you're reminded of here is that when you look at what makes 2024 different for Georgia, when you look at Georgia's pursuit of a championship this year, whether it achieves that goal or not, the makeup of how they're going to do it, you sort of get the impression that transfers are going to be a little bit more a part of the story for Georgia than we're kind of used to them being here in this transfer portal era. Kirby's never been anti-transfer. He's always been willing to consider transfers, but in 2022, when Georgia won the national championship, they were sort of famous for not having any transfer of players. That's not always the case for Georgia, but in that particular year, Georgia wasn't a heavy transfer team. They didn't have any transfer players in that particular season. But this year, transfers are going to be a little bit more a part of the story. Players that have played elsewhere now coming to Georgia for their shot at additional stardom that they weren't finding at their previous location. In fact, when ESPN, they have kind of a fun thing up right now. We'll probably do some stuff on this piece over the course of the next few days here a little bit. But they did kind of their big scene setter, off-season storyline, some of the same kind of stuff we're doing here right now. And they were kind of looking at like the 10 biggest stories in college football for the upcoming year. And in mentioning Georgia, they are also referencing what I'm referencing here right now. When you look at Georgia's hope to return to glory, the role that transfers are playing in this is kind of a part of the overall narrative for UGA. Do we have this we can show here? Yeah, this is from ESPN. The headline, and it's a story worth reading because it's pretty wide-ranging, a lot of different stuff. It's 100 days to college football, the top games, the players, and the contenders. And when they look at the 10 best stories they see in college football for the upcoming season, the 7th best story in their mind is Georgia's attempt at a bounce back. This is what the writers say. Like Florida State, Georgia felt it was snubbed from a spot in the 4-team college football playoff a year ago after losing to Alabama in the SEC championship game. Now, here's the blurb that I think is kind of interesting. This is the sort of synopsis from a 30,000-foot view, the national perspective on Georgia's chances of or how Georgia's going to attempt to bounce back and get back to the college football playoff. The ESPN folks say, with quarterback Carson Beck returning, another number 1 recruiting class, and key additions from the transfer portal, like Trevor Etienne, Colby Young, Michael Jackson III, Ben Urasek, the Bulldogs seem poised to make another run. So what's interesting here is not that ESPN's predicting Georgia to potentially make another run towards a championship. We already know that. The expectation is that Georgia will do that. But it's the perception of how they're going to get that done. They mentioned Carson Beck coming back. They mentioned the number 1 recruiting class, what Georgia's sort of famous for doing on a yearly basis, or at least close to that on a yearly basis. And they mentioned the presence of these transfers, that Georgia's still not as transfer-laden a team as, like, say, Florida State was a year ago or Ole Miss is every year. But transfers, we think, are going to be more a part of the story for Georgia this season than they have been in the past. That's one of the narratives here, and Trevor Etienne is a part of that. And I would suggest here, to kind of wrap all of this up, that when you look at some of these transfers, especially Etienne, especially Colby Young, guys like that, maybe Ben Urasek too, when you look at guys like this, specifically Young and probably Etienne, maybe most of all, when you look at them, I would say they're kind of here for a specific reason. These guys aren't going to be having the sole responsibility of replacing Brock Bowers. But when you did look at what Bowers did a year ago, or what he did for the 3 years he was here at Georgia, Bowers just made it easy. And at times, it sort of seemed like Brock Bowers was this Georgia offense's easy button. It's 3rd and 8. What are we going to do? Let's just give it to Bowers. We've got a game against Auburn on the road last year where things aren't really clicking. Man, we're in danger of, maybe not getting out of here with a win unless we're careful. All right, what do? Let's just keep feeding Bowers over and over again. That's going to probably work. It was just sort of this offense's easy button. And I believe that any successful offense at any level of football, NFL, college, high school, even probably Pee-wee, whatever level of football you're talking about, any kind of offense, you've got to be able to tell me what's easy for you, or you're not going to probably be as successful as you want to. Now, there are some things that are always going to be hard. Deep throws are just harder to be accurate on. Defense is sort of trying to take that away from you. They got safeties back. Being successful on harder plays like that's not going to be easy for any team. But something for your offense needs to be easy. You've either got the bell cow running back, you've got the first-round pick style wide receiver, or you've got whatever. And for the last 3 years, Brock Bowers has kind of been the easy button for the Georgia offense. Well, he's no longer here anymore. And so when you think about Colby Young, the size that he could possess in the red zone, the ability to make potential third down catches, or a guy like Trevor Etienne, who, because of his speed, because of his elusiveness, could be easy to find in the passing game, could be a nice change of pace for the running game. Also a guy that has the potential just to make things a little easier for the Georgia offense, and that's going to really matter in a year in which a guy like Brock Bowers, who did that for 3 years, is no longer here. So let's sum all this up this way. If you're a Georgia fan, of course you love hearing Greg McElroy say, sky's the limit for Trevor Etienne. It's just sort of fun to hear, and we'll all be looking forward to see if that becomes true. And the reason why the sky could be the limit is because Etienne's one of those guys who could be tasked with kind of providing some of the opportunity to fill the statistical void left behind because Brock Bowers is no longer here. But either way, as we look at what makes 2024 different for Georgia, as we look at how the chase and the pursuit of a championship this year is going to be unlike what we've experienced in the past, it is the presence of transfers that kind of make this a little bit different, and the role they could play for Georgia that'll make this team look, perhaps a little different than it has been in the past, but certainly a lot of fun to watch as soon as this fall finally arrives. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. We're happy to have you with us no matter how you get to us across all the platforms, video, radio, podcast, everything else. And I want to say a specific thing here for a moment. Yesterday we kind of put out a little message to our friends at YouTube, and boy, they did a great job of responding, and I really, really appreciate that. I want to do something similar here today. If you're watching the show on Facebook, and there's a part of me that's always going to have a lot of, I think, connection to our friends on Facebook, even though over the course of years, Facebook's become a little bit less of a video platform than it once was, but it's the video platform we started on. Very first video we ever did was on Facebook, and we first started on video way back in 2017. That's the only video we had, and some of you have been with us ever since then, and I certainly appreciate that. One of the things you can do if you watch us on Facebook, and this doesn't apply to everybody, I totally understand that, but if you are watching on Facebook, whether you're watching right now live or you watch it on Facebook after the fact, would you mind sharing the show? Just click share, sharing the show with your feed. Perhaps there are Georgia fans who connect with you on Facebook that don't know about us or haven't seen us in a while, or Facebook doesn't really send out notifications the way that it used to. So there may be some people that kind of forgot we're here. Well, would you mind just sort of sending out the show and letting people know that we're here? I would certainly appreciate all of that. So please make sure you do that here today, if you don't mind. If you like the show, you want more people to know about it there on Facebook, would you mind sharing the show? That'd be certainly a great thing if you would do that. Let me also give a shout out to our friends at Kroger for making the show possible for you there as well. And we are moving into that special time of year. If you drive around, you see all the signs at the front of every neighborhood, all the graduates, whether it be high school graduation, college graduation, fifth grade graduation, whatever else. Just seems like there's a lot of that here right now. And if you want that A-plus graduation party for the graduate in your life, Kroger is the name to know for all of this. Party trays, decorations, the gift cards, the kind of, the sort of greeting card type stuff to celebrate the graduate in your life. You can get all of that at Kroger and make this a really, really special time of year. So stop by in store and do your shopping, or check out Kroger.com/graduation for more on that. That's Kroger.com/graduation for more on that. Okay, we've got Jeff Sentell here coming up in a moment. Fun stuff with him as the Georgia Scavenger Hunt takes place. We talked a lot of recruiting yesterday. We're going to kind of follow up some of that and give you new information here in a little bit as it relates to the Scavenger Hunt for Georgia and a major opportunity to impress a lot of big-time recruits. We'll do that here in just a little bit. Prior to that, though, let's go around the doghouse. And this is one of those things I've wanted to talk about for a couple of days just because I think it's kind of a fun topic, not super serious. I thought that Friday would be a kind of a good day to do this. So speaking of graduation, the University of Georgia just had its commencement exercise there at Sanford Stadium. And at the end of the night, there's a big fireworks display. And the athletics account kind of celebrated that, put the picture out there. And that drew a pretty interesting response from one of Georgia's key leaders and key vocal leaders, Tate Ratledge. Let me show this on the screen here. Once again, this could not be less important. It's not a serious topic, but I do think it's kind of fun. So if you're watching on video, you see the fireworks going off after the graduation ceremony. This is kind of from the viewpoint, I believe, of the Tate Center parking lot, looking into the kind of west end zone situation there. Am I looking at that correctly? I think that's right. Maybe that's inside the stadium. Maybe I'm looking at that wrong. But anyway, so it happens. Actually, I think that is inside the stadium. So fireworks go off. Beautiful way to celebrate all of this. Actually, it's the Georgia football account who shared this. Congratulations to the newest graduates of the University of Georgia. And then there's the picture of the fireworks, the little red hue around all of those. Well, Tate Ratledge put it out there. He says, how about a petition for fireworks at games? So Tate Ratledge wants to see Georgia shoot off more fireworks during the games. Now, a lot of you are probably not surprised to know this. I'm essentially like, you know what Clark Griswold is? I'm essentially Clark Griswold. I love every holiday. I love all the pomp and circumstance of all those. I love, like, Memorial Day. I mean, obviously Memorial Day is a little bit different type of deal because we're honoring the fallen, but there's still some tradition of some, fun, fireworks, cookouts, things like that around Memorial Day, the 4th of July. I love fireworks. Now, some of y'all need to be careful in your own neighborhood shooting off the fireworks. But in terms of sanctioned fireworks displays, I can't get enough of them. I just love them. I'm a huge fan of fireworks. So my first reaction to what Tate Ratledge says there is, yeah, man, we need to start having fireworks at Georgia football games. I think that'd be awesome. I just think, to me, I've never seen fireworks that didn't have a right to exist. They all just, to me, are really, I just think it's really cool. I also then sort of thought, and this is where the honesty compels me to admit kind of comes in here a little bit. Ratledge famously sort of grew up as a Tennessee fan. There's that famous sort of meme that gif that you sometimes see of the Power T being pulled off the truck when Ratledge chose to go to Georgia instead of going to Tennessee. The fireworks thing, I do sort of associate with Neyland Stadium a little bit. So if Georgia did start shooting off fireworks, they, I guess, would get the criticism of you're just trying to copy Tennessee. I'm guessing that's the case. That wouldn't necessarily stop me from wanting to do it, but there probably would be some people who might say, sort of a Tennessee thing. But even still, fireworks, it's not like Tennessee invented fireworks. Fireworks are fireworks. I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that after Georgia scores a touchdown, Georgia gets the win. You know how the Redcoats always play the fight song, the Glory, Glory with the Ode to Joy kind of tagged onto it. Can you imagine that playing? The fireworks are going off, the chapel bells being rung. I mean, that to me seems like, pretty good pomp and circumstance. I wouldn't mind having that as a part of my Georgia game day. I think that would probably improve things. And then I also thought this, a little bit like the LED lights. Georgia plays so few night games that you could say you're shooting off fireworks, but if you don't have a night game, you don't get a chance to prove that. So, there's obviously been a lot of day games. And so I had all these thoughts about what Tate Ratledge was saying. But then some new information came to me, and I wasn't aware of this. I think this is probably a fact. I haven't seen anybody refute this, that if you would be sort of anti-fireworks or anti-things like that because you assume that Georgia's not going to get enough night games, a guy named Matt Jones, you may know him, he's also known as Kentucky Sports Radio, on the X platform, put out some interesting reporting this week. As I said before, I haven't seen anyone refute this, so I'm assuming this is true. Matt Jones says that under the new SEC TV contract, every team is guaranteed no more than 2 noon games at home every season. Now, that's certainly interesting. Now, for Georgia this year, the Clemson game is at noon. That's not a home game, so you could still get 2 noon home games, obviously in addition to that, if we assume that Matt's reporting is real here. But this may be an example of, in this new world in which all of the media rights for the SEC are controlled by ESPN and its family of networks, perhaps this is the kind of thing that some fans might think is better, is that you won't have the huge number of noon starts that it sort of feels like Georgia's had in the past. You might have, at the very least, more late afternoon starts, if not actual night starts there too, and a little bit more pomp and circumstance for some of these night games. Maybe that's a pretty good idea. We've already got the light show and turning the thing red and all that kind of stuff. Ratledge says he'd like to have some fireworks. That's probably a pretty good idea. Georgia will probably get some criticism. You're just copying Tennessee or whatever other SEC team shoots off these fireworks. But fireworks are fireworks. I think that's probably a pretty good idea. Tate Ratledge, a important key leader for Georgia. In this case, I wouldn't mind if he got his way. We'll make that around the doghouse here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger here today. Okay, so here is what's coming up before we are done today. We started the show by saying that the spring sports for Georgia, Florida, baseball, softball, and the regional, both those games have been moved up. Georgia did get itself a very nice win against Florida in baseball last night. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that before our show is done. Georgia's just playing a really clutch brand of baseball here at the moment, looking really good as it does that. Also, we're going to have a little bit of a blast from the past before we're done today there as well. Last night we saw, and at least by margin of victory, a shocking result as the Minnesota Timberwolves knocked off the Denver Nuggets by 45 points, evening that series up at 3 games apiece and forcing a Game 7 against the world champs. And obviously the revelation during this NBA playoffs has been Anthony Edwards, the former Georgia star, what he's doing there in the NBA. Well, a few years ago, just prior to Edwards beginning his Georgia career, I had a chance to interview him. And there was a couple of very interesting things that I think came out of that. Some of this stuff has sort of recently come back to light, and so we're going to do some fun with that here before we're done today there as well. So a little bit of a look at Ant-Man, a little bit of a look at the Georgia baseball win there against Florida. So all of that is upcoming before we're done. I'm also tap dancing for Jeff Sentell to get ready to go for us. Not quite here there as of yet. So why don't we go ahead and say that was Around the Doghouse. And if we need to take a couple of comments here before we would bring on Jeff Sentell, we will get ready to do that. So I'll just sort of ask some of y'all right now as we kind of wait on Jeff. Are you pro fireworks the games? I think I probably would be pro firework in that situation. I used to wrestling used to start the shows with the big pyrotechnic display. Raw and SmackDown too. Now they don't really do that anymore. I guess they decided that fireworks were very, very expensive for something that didn't necessarily make more people want to watch the shows. So if you start the shows now, you don't see the big pyrotechnics display to begin the shows the way you did back in the 90s. They don't do that. So maybe fireworks would get really expensive at a Georgia football game too, but something tells me that Georgia could probably afford to do this. And who knows? Maybe Georgia, scores enough points to keep those things firing all the time. I think that'd be a pretty good thing. Andrew Sisson was there for the graduation display last year in spring of 2023, and he says they were awesome. I love fireworks displays. I do. You ever go to the Friday night fireworks for a Braves game or something like that? They do a great job. They do, they do the whole big thing there. It's beautiful. You kind of time it with the music. It's really nice. When you get a little older, going to the 4th of July firework gets a little tough because you don't like fighting the crowds and the traffic and things like that. You don't want to end up getting arrested like Scotty Scheffler. So as I've gotten older, I probably don't venture out into the municipal fireworks on the 4th of July the way that I once would have. But I do like fireworks in general. Randy Hall says, how about an exploding bulldog in the air? Well, I don't know if you could do that, but y'all ever seen these drone shows they do now? And if you're just joining us wondering why we're talking about nonsense, we'll have Jeff Sentell presumably here in just a few minutes. Us doing this on a Friday is a little bit of a new thing for Jeff, so he may not realize we're doing this today. But you know how you have the drone shows. Have you ever seen one of these? Can you imagine if they had the drone show that made the UGA in the air? I think that'd be a pretty cool thing. I do enjoy the drone shows. Maybe we could do that here pretty soon there too. Also, we'll open this up to any other kind of comments y'all want to do. We'll kind of do all that here today there as well. So if you want to kind of get a little pre-recruiting talk going and have a good time. Yeah, so let me jump on here and go to YouTube here for a moment there as well. And, of course, we appreciate all of you being with us. And we got a fun Friday coming. We'll still do our regular cool down when it's all said and done today. But we'll kind of keep this going here for a little bit. JSZN, maybe this is J Season. I think I've got that right. J Season says that the Gators did fireworks in the Tennessee game last year and it looked cool. Yeah, I mean, I do think fireworks look cool. I didn't realize that Florida did those. I knew Tennessee did them. Does South Carolina do these as well? I feel like I have big memories of Tennessee doing a lot of fireworks. I want to say I've seen South Carolina do them. Yeah, maybe South Carolina does them too, because didn't they run out of fireworks when they scored 60-something points against Tennessee? Am I remembering that correctly? I did not realize that Florida also did them, but there you go. If 3 teams in the SEC already do fireworks, then there's nothing wrong with Georgia doing them too, because that means everybody does them. So from that standpoint, you can't really be accused of copying anybody. And plus, after Georgia got the LED lights, Alabama copied them. I say bring on the fireworks. I think that Tate Ratledge is right about this. Bring on the fireworks. And Ratledge, you know how Babe Ruth was, Yankee Stadium was supposedly the house that Ruth built? Tate Ratledge could be forever known as the man who brought the fireworks to UGA. I think that'd be a pretty cool that'd be a pretty cool legacy right there. Darian Ford, thanks for the kind words, complimenting the way I'm dressed today. I appreciate that. Oh, Timothy Wilson asked a question. It's funny you should ask this, Timothy, because we actually had somebody ask this on our 1st and 15 a little earlier today there as well. He says, are you still going to send out that gift for those who were in the Masters pool? So the answer is yes. Total confession here. We had some plans to send this out and did not quite work out the way we intended to. So we have now kind of gone a little bit different route on this. And so if you're in our Masters or if you're in our bracket, I do believe we've got something coming for you. I had to call in some help on this. I think we've got something coming for you. So give me a little bit more time on that. But I apologize for the delay. But I think I'm going to have something for everybody here. So it's funny that you asked about this because I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday. So give me a little time here, and we'll see if we can get that done. Absolutely. Greg Hendricks says Kentucky also does the fireworks there as well. So like half the SEC's doing fireworks. Half the SEC's doing fireworks at this point in time. So I don't see any reason why we should not be able to do that. I think that's a good idea. And Tate Ratledge can forever get the credit for being the one that did it. All right. All right. So with all that said, big weekend coming up for Georgia, scavenger hunt, and a whole lot more. Let's cover a lot of ground on all of that. As welcome in Jeff Sentell here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Boy, it is a big one on tap for Georgia. We've been talking about it a lot the last couple of days. It's the event known as the Scavenger Hunt. Georgia getting ready to host some major recruiting targets. In some cases, it'll be official visits. In some cases, it's guys coming in for the unofficial as a preview to the eventual official. So, Jeff, why don't we start right there, set the stage about who we're expected to see in Athens here this weekend.
Hey, Brandon. Good morning, buddy.
Good morning.
So big things, big takeaways from this weekend already is it's gone bonkers crazy. Normally this event a few years back, you remember Keely Ringo with the snake. You remember Find Coach Smart's selfies. It was basically a recruiting kind of an appetizer to the main event. You very rarely saw official visits. Let me give you a great example here. Think about James Coley here this weekend, okay? James Coley has 2 receivers in from California. It could be argued that new defensive backs coach Donta Williams had a lot to do with Phillip Bell and Marcus Harris visiting this weekend. And for both of those, it's sort of an example of Georgia's trying to get in the mix there. You hear Harris out of Mater Dei, former high school teammate of Nate Frazier. He's mostly Texas. Georgia's trying to knock down the door for Harris. With Bell, ironically, Brandon, he just started his official visit yesterday. He was on a plane to Athens yesterday. So not all of these official visits are going to be happening at the same time. But then Coley on Scavenger Hunt today, this is the big thing I'm setting up here, is that he's going to have C.J. Wiley and Travis Smith. Perhaps I'm going to make the argument here that Wiley and Smith are 1A, 1B, 2 biggest targets in town for the scavenger hunt. Those are unofficial visitors. Meanwhile, he's going to have to try to get Georgia in a good spot, maybe grease the wheels, maybe turn the heads considerably of 2 top 15 level wide receiver national prospects that are in town for their official visit. It's not only those 2 receivers, it's also Bo Jackson. Everybody knows the name. Bo Jackson, talented running back out of Ohio, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State are his final 3. He's out of Cleveland. And with Bo Jackson, it's kind of interesting, Brandon. We haven't seen this one in a while. He's on media silence. No interviews will be granted. Maybe some deep background interviews will be granted until after his 3 official visits, because he told me he wants to give complete respect to he didn't use this word, but the way he paraphrased it to me was the integrity of his recruiting process. I'll let you make your own side jokes about that and laugh about it. But and then finally, you got Zaire Addison, who he feels he's the best offensive tackle in the country. He could really play a great job in the SEC at guard or tackle. And he's a guy that he's the one that wrestles for his high school. He's the one that has ran the 100 and 200 in track. He's put on like maybe 50 pounds over the course of his high school career. And now he's kind of seen as an emerging top national prospect when hasn't ever visited Georgia before, but he knows Georgia's brand. Zaire told me this week that he actually has a relative that was coached by Kirby Smart at Alabama. And he said, quote unquote, I'm going to clean it up a little bit because we like to keep it ivory soap on the DawgNation Daily program. but he said that his family member who was coached by Kirby at Alabama says that Coach Smart is going to coach the stew out of you. You'll get that when Kirby Smart is your head coach. So Zaire Addison, meanwhile, all this big-time offensive tackle, 2 wide receivers, unofficial, 2 wide receivers, official, a running back named Bo Jackson that's somehow a sidebar to all this. And the headline story is David Sanders Jr., the number 1 tackle in the country, the number 2 prospect in the country, making another trip to Athens.
I want to get to the Sanders thing here in a moment, but as relates to Bo Jackson, first of all, it's important for people to understand that he is not related to Vincent Edward Bo Jackson, who is the obviously the famous SEC name formerly at Auburn and of Tecmo Bowl fame, but he is a good running back in his own right. We haven't talked a ton about him. People are kind of aware of him because of the fact that it is a famous name. Like, how do you compare him to, like, say, a guy like Ousmane Kromah or, in case of Kromah, that seems to be a running back that Georgia's more involved with now than it was when Del McGee was running backs coach. So how does, like, Jackson fit into the overall picture of the Georgia running back situation, whether it be Kromah or a guy like Bo Walker who's currently committed? Like where does Jackson fit into all of this?
Yeah, that's a great example of what's going on here right now with Georgia. I've got a lot of contacts. I've got a lot of coaches around the country. I've got several coaches in Ohio, Brandon, and I asked them basically what is their synopsis of Bo Jackson. And, this is the type of stuff that just kind of goes into my mental Rolodex, maybe not ready for a story yet. But here's kind of the cliff notes that what I got. Great kid, really good athlete, decent running backs. And there are some questions there about durability and toughness. What does that mean? What does that mean to the average recruiting fan right here? Well, it means to me that this is one of those players that will test amazingly, a great athlete. Now, is he a great football player yet? Is he a great you see he's missed some games in his high school career. I don't know the full story on that. Maybe there are great reasons why, but what did the former great Georgia Bulldog say one time? The best ability is availability. So there's some of that about Bo Jackson. Everybody knows he's got a famous name. Everybody knows he's got a Final Three. Everybody knows he's got some pretty good size and some rankings. But one of the things we try to do here in our walk here in our work covering Georgia recruiting is also tell you about what type of player assets these guys are going to be, both on the field and off the field. So when you bring up Bo Jackson, that's the curiosities I have. It's like you've got a player here coming out of Ohio. Again, when I hear Ohio Midwestern players, even though Georgia is making a major push into the Midwest, Brandon, when you think about players like Marquez Easley, Nitro Tuggle, Jaden Riddell, you've got Eugene Hilton, the junior in this class. You've got Marion Dye. You've got Georgia making a thrust into the Midwest when perhaps they have never done that before. But you compare him to an Ousmane Kromah, and Ous has major film inside Georgia big boy high school football. You wonder about the private school level of competition there for Bo Jackson in the state of Ohio. You wonder about durability. You don't hear any of those things there about Ousmane Kromah. And then the other thing you look at, Brandon, is like, well, we've got to talk about Bo Jackson. He's put up some, I don't know if you saw the video, it kind of popped up late last night, but he had himself posting some training video prior to his Georgia official, and he's running up hills. He's looking like very much a prospect doing it. Big, massive, great straight line speed. You think running up hills, my mind goes back to, Jerry Rice talk, that goes back to even Walter Payton type stuff, the type of grind that you have right there. So I would say most people are maybe misunderstood, and they think that Ohio State is the team to watch there and it's Ohio State's to lose. I think this is more wide open than folks might think. And I think Bo is genuinely curious and excited to hang out with Georgia this weekend and really try on the Georgia Nikes, so to speak, and make sure that's a really good fit.
All right, another name I wanted to mention, we spent some time talking about him yesterday, that's Isaiah Gibson, who I believe is taking the unofficial visit this weekend and got the official visit coming up shortly after that. Gibson's also been active on social media, kind of showcasing, some Georgia stuff as of late, kind of highlighting a recent visit Georgia coaches took down there to Warner Robins for him. Certainly I think the takeaway here is, despite the fact that Gibson publicly pledged to USC, much like in the case of Justice Terry, Georgia not slowing down its recruitment at all here.
Yeah, I don't think this is a win. Let me be a little bit more forthright than usually. I even try to conservatively try to be. Brandon, I think this is going to be a very hard recruiting for USC to win. And maybe I don't think the right word is to say maintain, because I think they're going to have to win it. I think they are in a bare knuckles, loser leaves town, all out brawl, coming over the top rope recruiting battle right now with Georgia. And let's face it, he's going to see Georgia this weekend. He's going to see Georgia for his official visit. He's going to see Georgia for games this fall. I think Georgia is well positioned to, use the term again, win the Isaiah Gibson recruiting race here. Sources in Warner Robins tell me they feel really good about it. It's just going to have to play its course. And the clarifier here, the disclaimer here, I feel like sometimes our audience wants to see like a disclaimer that comes with every recruiting battle these days. This is one that is expected, at least publicly, to go to the wire, which would be early signing day in December. I think the drama will be extended out here for Isaiah Gibson, much like it will be for Justice Terry. But I do think, and I'm sure you got some mileage out of that tweet with the GOAT Talk tweet with Kirby and Coach Uzo Doribe. Brandon, Georgia's been in a great spot with Isaiah for a very long time. He's the type of player Georgia goes after. He has the skill set, but he also has the size component that Georgia wants to see there. And I mean, again, that's another homegrown type guy right there, where it's one of those things now, Brandon, where if somehow USC's magnetism, let me say that in air quotes here, magnetism in terms of charming Isaiah Gibson holds, and they do win the recruitment, I would kind of expect Georgia to always feel like the destination for a portal situation should Isaiah not choose Georgia in the beginning. I think he will always have his mind on Georgia in terms of his college career.
You reported earlier this week that David Sanders is going to be here on an unofficial visit for the scavenger hunt, and I told our audience this yesterday. I mean, total honesty. You know, we had heard so much about Clemson for a while. I don't respect them at all when it comes to recruiting. So I wasn't, that worried about Georgia battling Clemson head-to-head. But then the narrative became, it's Tennessee and Ohio State, and they're coming in what we would presume are big NIL offers. At that point in time, I have to take that pretty seriously. And I like Sanders a lot as a player, but when you look at what Georgia's done along the offensive line and you see the desperate push from teams like Tennessee and Ohio State, totally honest, as a fan, I was like, well, that ship's probably sailed. This is probably not a guy who's going to end up here at UGA. Georgia gave it a game effort, but Georgia's kind of loaded up on offensive line as of late. You can't get them all, blah, 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 blah. All of a sudden, after all the talk about Tennessee and Ohio State, and I guess Clemson still to some degree a factor here, lo and behold, here's Sanders showing up at Georgia for the scavenger hunt. You're not as big a wrestling fan as I am, but the Undertaker meme of rising from the dead, seems like there may be a little bit of a rise up from Georgia here when it comes to the Sanders situation. I find that to be kind of certainly very fun, if not, interesting as well. What do you make of the fact that Sanders is going to be at Georgia after all the public momentum of late seems to have been in the direction of, like, say, Tennessee or Ohio State?
Yeah, Brendan, I just think this one's going to be back and forth and everywhere. First of all, I'm going to allow you to be kind of like Jimmy Hart on this one with your megaphone out. This is one you want to keep tabs on, Brandon, and I want to tell you why. And I hold both of these players for different reasons in the highest caliber of respect here. But I think David here is an example of the best qualities of Andrew Thomas combined with the best qualities of Broderick Jones.
Wow.
You put those guys together. I know people love it when recruiting analysts speak in player parallels because there's some commonality there, even though it's really hard to do and sometimes reckless to do. But I think with David, the way David is wired, the way his family circle is around him, reminds me a lot of Andrew Thomas. It's a kid that I know will succeed at the highest levels of college football. And yet you add the Broderick Jones element because there was, Broderick, like David, was an incredible athlete in high school football, and he needed to pack on the weight, and he eventually did. And David is doing just that. I think you combine both of those athletic types that Georgia has put in the first round, And that's kind of the player you get in David Sanders. David's probably a little taller than both of those guys. And, oh, yeah, by the way, he's such a phenomenal athlete that former Bulldog Robert Geathers, who is on the staff at Providence, has told me for a while now that he thinks if David said, you know what, don't want to be offensive tackle, that's not my jam anymore, he could go be Myles Garrett at that level of prospect at defensive end. Brandon, this is a new era. This is a new day. If you told Georgia fans back then that Andrew Thomas had an NIL number attached to him, you would want them to go for it. And I think there will be not only NIL attached to David, but this is a pursuit of a player that the worries, and I said this earlier about CJ Wiley, because I have to start looking at players differently in the year 2024. How would this player be with a major NIL deal? Would the work ethic still be there? Would the progression still be there? Would the hunger still be there? I feel the same way about David Sanders Jr. And I said this on Hedges, and not trying to make those catchy 1 minute sound bites here, but I would put David Sanders Jr. among the top 10 recruits Georgia has went after in the Kirby Smart era. That's the way I think about David. Here's something for Georgia fans to think about. What we've known about Sanders as his family, very close-knit group, very tight-knit group. It will be a family decision. He keeps coming back to Georgia for a reason. And I know a lot of people in the national media are charming this recruitment, labeling this recruitment as an NIL battle. I would also say this, what David has shown us throughout his recruiting is he goes and has great visits. And the schools he visits the most seem to have the highest value in terms of the eventual process. So the more you visit, the better the visit goes. I think that's great for Georgia and David Sanders. They should make him a priority. I think they will make him a priority. And I think this is what we said before, Brandon. Let me just tie things together, A and B. The money you save on a prospect like perhaps a Juju Lewis, or perhaps the number one receiver in the country who just came open again after decommitting from LSU, and now seems like he's heading towards Texas. The money you save at that spots, that's what you do it for, to win in the modern era of college football in the trenches the way that Georgia could with David Sanders. I think he's a first-round pick. I think he's a top 5 pick wherever he signs, Brandon. But this is the type of guy that would make Georgia not just better, but a lot better across the front.
All right, I want to try to hit 2 issues really quick here before we let you go. Georgia, speaking of wide receivers, has gotten a commitment since you and I last talked. Thomas Blackshear last Sunday, the 4-star from Savannah. We've had guests weighing in this week on what they think about Blackshear. We'll give you your turn, too. What is Georgia getting here when it comes to this particular 4-star receiver, with a couple of other 4-star receivers, as you mentioned earlier, also expected to be on campus this weekend?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of comparisons about Blackshear. Then, unfortunately, I'm going to be maybe not in the majority opinion here, where I can't give him the flowers George Pickens just yet. What the audience is seeing right now, I think this is what you get best with Thomas Blackshear. T-Black is what his friends and family call him, teammates call him. And this is old video, by the way. This is Benedictine in his sophomore year when they won the state title. He's like Dylan Bell, Brandon. That's where I think he's at right now. Can go get the deep ball, can win a lot of 50-50 balls. But I think where Thomas Blackshear is special at 6'1.5", 196 pounds, is the rack yards, the yak yards, the yards after the catch. I think that's where he could be special right away. He doesn't mind blocking. He doesn't mind the physicality. And he's been charmed by Georgia for a very long time. And for James Coley, this is the perfect time for a man of his recruiting acumen to be back at Georgia again, back at UGA, because he doesn't really need to leave the state. If you said, hey, James, Coach Coley, go get us Wiley, go get us Blackshear, and go get us Travis Smith, and then how about a Florida special here, or maybe a California special there? Brandon, that would be a gleefully good recruiting class that guys like me that do this for a living can say Georgia hasn't signed a group like that since at least 2020, when Georgia brought in Rosemy Jack-Saint, and they brought in Jermaine Burton, and they brought in Arian Smith. Perhaps you'd even have to go another year prior to that with Dominic Blaylock coming in along with George Pickens as well. But I know you have a soft spot for pro wrestling references, but you always have a soft spot for incredible playmaker, electric type wide receivers that have the ability to join Terrence Edwards in the 1,000-yard club. And there's a lot of those guys with that potential in the state of Georgia in the 2025 class.
All right, so last thing for you. This is a little bit off the radar a little bit, but when I'm hearing about, so-and-so's visiting and so-and-so's visiting, official visits in June or, scavenger hunt this weekend, one name that I sort of feel like is sort of conspicuously absent from this right now is Elijah Griffin. I'm not saying that Georgia's not in a good spot with Griffin. All the, sort of public predictions would lead you to believe that they probably are. How come we don't hear more about Griffin in the midst of all of these visit announcements here right now?
I think Griffin is going to be one of those guys. You might be happy with this, Brandon. He's going to keep you programming, give you programming until December. That's another guy that's going to take that thing all the way. He's kind of said for a while that his Georgia official visit and maybe a couple others are going to take place during the season, and that's what I fully expect Elijah to do. He's just a guy that I think, again, Georgia has put itself in a very strong place for. We've known the name Elijah Griffin for several years, and I think that probably the chef's kiss, if we're already going to start writing the story of the 2025 class, now that the Julian Juju Lewis narrative has ended and ebbed, I think it's about getting those wide receivers, Brandon, and it's getting Justice Terry and Elijah Griffin. And it's May, man. All the hay will be tried to put in the barn in June and July, except for the case of Elijah Griffin. I'd watch for Elijah Griffin. Everybody's worried about officials with him and coming in the summer. I would watch for him for that late July visit, the one right before the season. I would watch for that one perhaps to pop up on the calendar, but Elijah's kind of always done his own thing a different way. I expect this recruitment to kind of look like a lot of those 2017, 2016 recruitments. Elijah's going to let that thing ride until signing day, and I don't even expect him. This might be news to you. I don't expect him to even make a commitment until that one on signing day. Brendan, how long has it been since we had one of those with a 5-star the caliber of Elijah Griffin?
That's fun. I'll also say this for those watching on video: that Savannah Christian logo is sick. The skull and crossbones and the side of the helmet like that, the white and black on the red helmet. That is a sick looking logo there. Really cool stuff from the folks down there at Savannah Christian. That's a sharp looking logo indeed. Jeff, enjoy your weekend. Obviously a busy time here for everybody, so enjoy all of that. And we will look forward to having you back here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, again very soon there as well.
Hey, man, be careful, buddy. I know how famous you are these days. You're going to wind up with a Savannah Christian helmet on the other side of your desk, man. You keep that up. But I do agree with you.
That is a sharp one for sure. Hey, good stuff, Jeff. Thanks a lot.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
And yeah, Jeff mentioned this a moment ago. Wanted to follow up on this. Decoria Moore. We didn't have this for our SEC Through today. Probably should have. Just didn't have it in there just because didn't necessarily apply to Georgia all that much. But a big decommitment from LSU. And you're going to see a couple schools get involved here. Perhaps Ohio State. Sounds like Texas pretty heavy there as well. But for a program, LSU perhaps still reeling a little bit. Brian Kelly trying to explain why they did not get those big defensive tackles out of the spring transfer portal, now dealing with a very high-profile wide receiver decommitment. Decoria Moore, the example there of that. All right, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And man, oh man, a little bit of chatter behind the scenes. Told you this yesterday. Maybe pretty soon, before you know it, we could have a big announcement about, I don't know. Well, let me just not say too much about this as of yet, because it's all still very early days here. But interesting discussions being had behind the scenes. What I can tell you is this. We're about to have an incredible summer involving Royal Caribbean. So many of you have got Royal Caribbean cruise vacations planned. You always tell me when you do, and I love that. The thing that I love most of all is that so many of you, when you're making those Royal Caribbean cruise vacation plans, you're looking at those itineraries that include a stop there at Perfect Day Coco Cay. To me, it's the private island oasis that makes a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation exactly what it's supposed to be. And if you've never tried it before, this is your time to do that. So when I'm searching for my Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, first of all, I'm going to use a great travel agent to help me do that. Jessica Slater is the one we use. Because when it comes to all the different choices, what port do you want to sail out of? What ship do you want to sail on? What ports do you want to visit? Ports of call do you want to visit? Well, obviously, all of, those choices and options Jessica Slater can help you sift through, and that's true for you there as well if you're going to be coming up on Utopia of the Seas. Utopia of the Seas is a brand new Oasis-class cruise ship getting ready to debut in July. It's going to be 3 and 4 night sailings out of Port Canaveral. That means live in the Atlanta area, short drive for you. I believe all of the Utopia of the Seas itinerary is going to include stops at Perfect Day Coco Cay. So you want a great vacation option, late summer into the fall, looking ahead to maybe holiday travel, early 2025. 3-4 night cruise on a brand new Oasis class ship going to Perfect Day Coco Cay. It doesn't get any better than that. So call Jessica Slater, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com for more on that today. All right, let's talk some football here for a moment. This is outside the SEC, but I would say that it relates to the SEC here a bit. Dabo Swinney's words got a lot of attention here this week. Some of it was because it was kind of corny, and some of it seemed sort of like excuse-making. But the fact that Clemson has not taken a player out of the transfer portal for this upcoming year. We talked about Georgia not doing that in 2022. That obviously worked out to the tune of a national championship. Clemson, though, seems like it's probably under a little bit more pressure than Georgia would have been then because Clemson's kind of fallen off the perch that it once was on. But if you've seen these about the idea that most transfers aren't good enough to come here, or the fact that everybody's a transfer because they've all transferred out of high school or something like that, which is one of those sort of corny Dabo-isms that kind of got some attention. I thought the folks over at Football Scoop had a pretty good story on this because they looked a little bit deeper at the full context of what Dabo said beyond just the quote that got the most attention. The thing that got the most attention is that most guys in the portal aren't good enough to play for us. But the thing that the folks at Football Scoop pointed out, perhaps rightly so, is that Dabo actually sort of broke this down into sort of like 3 categories of transfer players. And basically what he says is when it comes down to the player who goes in the portal because he wants the highest possible offer he can get, Dabo says, we're not going to win that battle anyway. So perhaps there's a degree of honesty here about what Clemson is able to do in the transfer portal right now from an NIL standpoint. And I think maybe Dabo was being more honest than people gave him credit for. At the same time, though, I don't think those that point out, if you're not playing this game at all right now from an NIL standpoint or a scouting standpoint, and frankly, just to be honest with you, the other thing that Dabo said in the quote that Football Scoop pointed out is, guys go in the transfer portal because they already know where they want to go. Well, what we would interpret from that is, that means they're being tampered with. And if you're not willing to tamper right now, even if it's sort of a stated rule that you're not supposed to do, if you're not willing to tamper at least a little bit, then you're not going to get transfer players. That means you're not playing the game. This is one of those rules, like a lot of laws in America these days, that are just not being enforced. And if you see the lack of enforcement and you don't participate in that process, then you're going to be shortchanging yourself from a roster standpoint. So I liked this Football Scoop article. I thought it did a good job of giving some full context around Dabo, perhaps more honest than people initially realized, but also the honest response back is, okay, but if you're not playing this game, what is your plan for getting a deep and talented roster? Because if you don't have one of those, you are not in the business of contending for a championship. Speaking of provocative quotes, Nick Saban also had one of those recently. We've seen Saban playing a lot of golf lately. He was at the Regions Traditions thing the other day. Was also recently at the Jimmy Rain golf tournament there too. And the quote that he gave there about the future of college athletics and college football was kind of interesting, that the current lawsuits that are going on, we've talked about House versus NCAA and the back pay and the billions of dollars that college programs may have to pay out here, that Saban says, that, I'm reading this from AL.com, that he's concerned that these lawsuits may break college football. And we certainly understand where this is coming from. And frankly, this is why the NCAA and the members that make up the NCAA seem to be working as hard as they can to get to some sort of a settlement on this that perhaps brings this to a close. But if you dive a little deeper into this, and I promise we're not going to do this because it's super complicated, but if you read some of the stuff that like Pete Thamel has written lately and some of the Ross Dellinger, the one thing they're trying to do within like the legalese right now is sort of write the settlement in such a way that it bars future lawsuits. And a lot of legal analysts are saying that what they're trying to do is not going to work. Now, you would probably have to know more about the law to know if that's right or not, and obviously we're not lawyers. But the one thing I will point out here is that, first of all, Saban's obviously right that these lawsuits are incredibly, incredibly dangerous for the future of college athletics. There's no doubt that's the case. And there seems to be this sort of shrug on the part of, a certain type of well-educated person of, well, what are you going to do? This is the law. But the proper context here is that forever there have always been, certain sort of activist figures within the legal world, in some cases lower courts, who are always willing to sort of, side with labor in some sort of dispute against sports. And this kind of stuff almost always gets overturned by a higher court when cooler heads prevail. I'll take you back to the turn of the century or near the turn of the century when Maurice Clarett sort of challenged the NFL and the ability to enter the NFL prior to your third year out of high school. Court initially sided with Clarett, but eventually the NFL's standing as an institution in America was protected by a higher court. The same thing could be happening here with college athletics too. College athletics was winning in court for decades and decades and decades. The idea that the NCAA can't buy a win in court is only something that's been true in the last 20 years or so. Now, to my knowledge, the laws didn't change. The only thing that's changed is the interpretation of those laws. And the best that I can tell, the only reason why these laws are now being interpreted differently is because a small subset of America, people with very big educations that live in very big cities, for the most part, have decided that college athletics is no longer good. And so, therefore, now the courts seem to be bending the direction of that public opinion. And if something else is going on here, then I need a better explanation than what's currently being provided. So Nick Saban says these lawsuits are a problem. I think that he's probably right. One more story for you here, and this is relevant for Georgia. Shane Beamer, the South Carolina coach, was talking recently about his belief, and it echoes a lot of what you hear Kirby Smart say and what a lot of other programs say too, is that the main way in which you build your roster, according to what Beamer says, can't be through the transfer portal. It's got to be through high school football recruiting, which, as I said before, is not really a new, piece of information necessarily. Coaches like Kirby Smart say that a lot, but it's obviously easy for Kirby Smart to say that because he's the coach at Georgia. And, Kirby Smart's currently viewed as the best coach in college football, but the Georgia coaching position for a long time has been viewed as essentially the best job in college football because of the resources you have available. High school football recruiting requires a lot of resources. You've just got to be a very moneyed, resourced program to do that well. South Carolina is in the SEC, but it is several notches below Georgia in terms of the resources available. So I actually think it's pretty commendable. And when you're kind of thinking about long-term futures for coaches, the fact that Beamer says it'd be a little easier just to stock up on transfers the way that Florida State did a year ago, the way that Ole Miss does every year. It'd be easier to kind of go after these short-term propositions and try to take some shortcuts on being competitive. But we're a better program over the long haul if we make high school football recruiting the focus of our chief efforts here. That, to me, speaks of Shane Beamer's ability to have some staying power as a coach. Now, obviously, he needs to win games. Gamecocks took a step back in 2023 compared to where they had been in 2022, so he needs to be better here in 2024. But if I am a South Carolina fan, or if I'm an SEC observer kind of wondering about the long-term hierarchy, the long-term pecking order within the SEC, a coach like this saying, I'm willing to try to do what's hard here, I'd give some respect to that. And the truth is, if you look deeply here, South Carolina's not doing that bad when it comes to high school football recruiting overall. They probably deserve a little credit for that. By the way, where this becomes relevant for Georgia, South Carolina right now a major factor when it comes to Zayden Walker, the linebacker that Georgia would love to have. Gamecock's a pretty big factor there on that right now. So you gotta give them some credit for that. We'll also make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, here on Fridays, one of my favorite parts of the week, our chance to start looking ahead to the weekend here a little bit. And we do that with what we call the long finish here, brought to you by our friends at the Finish Long Drink. And as we mentioned off the top of the show, weekend for some sports fans gets started a little earlier than anticipated because Georgia baseball was supposed to be a 6 o'clock start tonight against Florida, got moved up to 1 p.m. because of the weather. So with that in mind, we'll look ahead to Georgia trying to play its way into a kind of a national seed here. Got the win last night, 9-4 against Florida. Florida, who at the beginning of the season was sort of thought to be one of the top teams in America, is actually sort of playing for its postseason life right now. but Georgia apparently just as hungry and just as motivated because of what it can do from a seeding standpoint for the upcoming NCAAs, or perhaps a chance to host a super regional after that. And Wes Johnson, after last night's win, made it really clear that's the kind of edge that Georgia's going to try to take in to a Game 2 today, and what we presume, weather permitting, a Game 3 there on Saturday. Here's Wes Johnson on that topic.
It doesn't matter who you're playing, what the emotions are. Game, it's a little different. It's one pitch at a time. You got to focus. You can't give away at bats. You can't give away pitches. In the strike zone, base runners, everything, and we're doing a really good job of that right now. And we need to continue it tomorrow because they're going to be desperate here tomorrow. And for us, I try to tell our guys that the panic button is something you can't ever hit, no matter what situation you're in. That usually when people buttons hit a little bit, some guys get out of their their comfort zone. So we're just going to come out tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Leighton Finley's going to throw the first pitch at 1, and we're going to start right there.
I really like this guy. Now, listen, it's easy to feel that way when the team's winning. You always like to coach when the team's winning. But total confession here, when they brought in Wes Johnson, kind of an analytics-minded pitching guru, which is sort of the book on him, like I wasn't really quite so sure what that was going to feel like. I'm just being completely honest here. Like, is this going to be an egghead? Is this going to be, is this going to feel like the kind of, sort of level-headed, even-keeled sort of manager type that you want your team to have? And that's what Wes comes across like to me. I really like his personality. Totally understand it's easy to like the coach's personality when the team is winning, but I think that Johnson's giving him something right now. I don't think there's any doubt that Georgia's playing better baseball in part because of the leadership that he's shown over the program here right now. I'll give him a ton of credit for that. Also, one more thing as part of our long finish here. This has sort of recently come back to light here. Congratulations to the Ant-Man, Anthony Edwards. The Timberwolves got another win last night, 45 points, whatever it was, against the world champion Denver Nuggets, forcing now a Game 7 to come up in Denver here this weekend. But Ant-Man's been the revelation in the NBA playoffs, really one of the biggest stories in sports over the course of the last few weeks. His rise, his ascendance there in the NBA, and obviously a former Georgia star. And just before he started his Georgia career, I had a chance to interview Ant-Man. We did kind of one of these sort of fancy long-form style interview type things. And one of the things that came up during that interview was the fact that obviously around here we got football in the brain always, but Ant-Man back in his Pee-wee days was more than just a basketball star. He was a pretty big football star too. And so a lot of folks kind of brought this back up just recently because Ant-Man's been in the news a lot. And so we will give you a chance to sort of see a very different look at one of the biggest stars in the NBA here right now, back when he was a very young football star, and me having some fun with him about that. Let's go back to 2019 for this.
I was looking at some highlights for you, and if you don't mind, I want to show you something for a second. What comes to your mind when I show you this series of highlights right here? What comes to your mind when you see
that's the dog, man. That's that football. Hey, I loved football when I was younger. I was a dog.
So I have to admit, until recently, I didn't know you were. I mean, when you watch these highlights, you're obviously the same Ant-Man we see on the floor.
Yeah, I'm good at football. I can play wide receiver, but.
I mean, do you ever think what might have been when you see yourself doing that kind of stuff?
Yeah, sometimes I'll be thinking like, man, I could play out there with those people, but I just don't like it no more.
Yeah, that day I found Ant-Man to be a really cool dude, and I'm obviously thrilled for the success he's enjoying. I also had a terrible haircut back then, and not the greatest camera angle for me, but Ant-Man looks great, which is, I guess, what matters more than anything else. And that is the long finish here on the on DawgNation Daily, presented by the Finish Long Drink. And as you're heading towards a weekend that we hope provides you everything you want and all the fun and enjoyment you can stand, of course, the Finish Long Drink, a great part of all of that, a ready-to-drink cocktail. So how about a ice-cold cooler filled of Finish Long Drink here this weekend? Maybe not a lot of pool time and stuff like that. Perhaps it's too much rain in the forecast for that, but maybe it's back patio, maybe it's a little front porch, maybe it's just hanging out with some friends. Whether it's the long drink cranberry, the blue can, the traditional long drink, grapefruit flavor, the gin kick, long drink strong, 8.5% alcohol by volume, the long drink zero, no carbs, no sugar. A lot of you found the long drink, the peach flavored version. It's the peach can, limited time here in the state of Georgia. Of course, it's a really cool story how the Finnish long drink comes from Helsinki back in the 1950s. A lot of famous celebrities have kind of, Miles Teller, Ricky Fowler, have kind of helped get it in America and make it be the kind of thing that we've been talking about now on DawgNation Daily for a long time. So If you haven't tried some Finish Long Drink, this is a great weekend to do it. Or if it's a regular part of your weekend routine, hey, enjoy it as you go through the next couple of days here. And, of course, if you want to find out more, you can go to thelongdrink.com. Put in your zip code. You can find out where you can pick some up. Our good friend Kaylee Manziel was telling me she was enjoying some Finish Long Drink last night. So we love all of that. We love the Finish Long Drink, and great to have them as a part of the Long Finish every week here on DawgNation Daily. And as we say goodbye, a couple of golden shoes to give out for you here today. Let's start with this one, and we'll show you this on the screen. Our friend Tiffany Ard here, who has shared golden shoes before. Don't you love to see a picture like this? She says, today is team day at my daughter's school. They were supposed to wear a jersey, but she had to spice hers up and add her chain, some black eye stickers. I wouldn't have her extra self any other way. How about that from Tiffany and her daughter? What an awesome picture that is. This is that kind of fun time of year where schools are doing fun things like this. You love to see Tiffany's daughter kind of spicing up the jersey, a little eye black, a little Georgia chain there. That is good stuff on these final days of school. So, Tiffany, to you and your family, hope y'all enjoy all of that as we head towards the start of the summer. That is truly great to see. Also, how about this? We mentioned Perfect Day Coco-K a little earlier. Ness Baldazan, one of our famous DawgNation cruisers. In fact, his Twitter handle is Dog Cruiser. Says, I don't know if you've tried this Dr. Pepper or not. It's the Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut, which we've been telling you about. He says, it's worth having on our next DawgNation cruise. It belongs at Coco-K for sure. Yeah, that creamy coconut flavor sort of makes you feel like you're in the tropics, makes you feel like you're in the Caribbean. It is a great new flavor from our friends at Dr. Pepper, and I love the fact that Ness Baldazan is enjoying that here today. Thanks to shouting out one of our great sponsors and Dr. Pepper there on that. And Ness, we will give you a golden shoe for that there as well. How about the lousy, stinking Gators? Long time since they've beaten Georgia. It's 1,287 days. That is our Gator Hater Updater. We hope you all have a great weekend. We'll see you back here Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Welp, and on video, we'll say that. Did not mean for this to turn into a marathon show, but somehow it sort of did. We'll get your comments here and hope you're all getting ready for a fun weekend. We'll kind of roll through all of these here right now. Doggy says, speaking of giving Shane Beamer credit, perhaps the best thing he's done thus far is get Georgia off its schedule. Yeah, I mean, Gamecocks sort of behind the scenes made no secret of the fact they did not want to play Georgia every year, and it seems like they're going to probably end up getting their wish there on that. BMAC asks a good question. By the way, it's good. I feel like we hadn't seen BMAC in a little while. Good to see BMAC here today. He says, Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey were surprising recruits. Now, Bowers was a four-star, but perhaps the fact that he ends up as an all-time great makes him a somewhat surprise. He says, are there any incoming freshmen that will be the next big surprise? So I always say the caveat to this is, at a place like Georgia, so many recruits get so much attention, it's sort of hard for anybody to truly be the definition of a surprise. In terms of pleasant surprise for this year, I think the guys most likely to contribute are guys that we've already talked about. But over the course of a career, I'd keep my eye on Sakovi White. If Georgia ends up having one of these, oh my gosh, where'd this kid come from type of stories, the way that they have a lot in the past, I would say that Sakovi White is maybe the most likely to do that. Let's see what else. Georgia and Olive mentioning a big alumni club there in Austin. Yeah, it's kind of cool to think, Georgia graduates sort of spread out all over the place. It's always kind of funny where we hear from some folks from. That's always kind of a nice thing. They are kind of all over the place. Let's see what else. BMAC also mentioned the F1 race being in town. We are just conspiracy theorists about this. Absolutely believe that Texas tried to get this game on that weekend to keep Georgia fans out, and it is going to be hard, but Georgia fans, we don't believe are going to be denied. We still believe that Georgia fans are going to be at this game in huge numbers. Even with Texas trying to do what it did, we believe that Georgia fans are still there in huge numbers, we believe. PDT wondering if the thing I'm going to give away is an autographed Eddie. Yeah, so A, we'll not be giving away any autographed Eddies anytime soon, but you never know. And B, I don't want to oversell what this is. It was just a small thing, but it was something I meant to send out a couple of weeks ago. We've had a couple of snafus and have not been able to do that. But it's just a small thing, but we were going to try to send that out. And so hopefully we'll get that squared away soon. But I don't want to make it more than it is. Let us see what else. DT says he thinks that Tate Ratledge deserves a golden shoe for his fireworks idea. I like that too. Wait, so I didn't realize this. So earlier, obviously the big story today is the Scotty Scheffler thing, which is just the wildest story I've ever heard in my entire life. I mean, can you imagine being Team Scheffler, like your PR, your lawyer, like your client is literally the best dude in the world. Like there is no celebrity client who gives you less of a headache than Scotty Scheffler does. Ultimate family man, good at his sport, doesn't say dumb stuff, like the easiest dude in the world. So, you are not on call 24 hours a day. You are not ready for a fire drill. And then, can you imagine the phone blowing up? Your client's been arrested. Like, you make a list of the least likely people in sports to ever get arrested. Scheffler, this may seem like I'm overstating it. He would probably be number one on my list of the least likely athlete in sports to get arrested. And especially if you're his lawyer and if you're his, he's still got publicists, everything else. Can you imagine the scramble they went into this morning? So we were talking about that, to begin with. And I have what I believe is the correct take on all of this, which is all of this, whether it be the stereotype of the overzealous security or the stereotype of what some people are going to say is the entitled athlete, all of this traced back to golf. To me, is the only sport, one of the very few sports, where we put athletes in responsibility for getting themselves to the venue. Pretty much everything else is like you go see like a Hawks game at State Farm Arena. The team bus drives into the arena and parks inside the arena. Same thing for like the football teams. Georgia, the night before a home game, the entire team stays at a hotel room. The entire team gets on a bus. Even for a home game, they bus to Sanford Stadium. In golf, it's like, hey, just get to the course in time for your tee time, and you're all on your own to get there. Like, it's total madhouse. I go to a decent number of golf tournaments, at least throughout the years I have. Many of you have there too. It is always chaos around there. Chaos. And it's a situation. Now, there was also a tragedy this morning, not involving Scheffler. A pedestrian was struck, at Valhalla. So that was obviously a very big deal. But if you've ever been to a golf tournament, it's like only a small number of people can get close to the venue. They've got, access to be there, but they still can't get there because the traffic sometimes is so bad. And today in Louisville it was even worse. And so, you've got, just this crazy scenario playing out. But what we were talking about was how it kind of sort of goes back to, like, we're talking about athletes getting to the venue, and somebody brought up the Pascal Perez thing in the 1980s when he was circling 285, the Braves pitcher. I was very, very young, but I remember this being a really big deal. What I did not realize, though, is what SCM Dog puts in here, which is that Phil Niekro ended up taking his place as the starter. That was the night the Braves won the West. Was this 1982? Was that what year that was? I remember the Perez thing happening, but I didn't realize that was the game is that right, that clinched the West for the Braves? That's wild because in 82, I'm too young to remember this, but the Braves started out 13-0, set a National League record for wins to start a season, and then almost collapsed as the season went along, but ultimately held on to win the division. Okay, so here's Matt Rukavina checking in post anniversary from last night, saying we had a heck of an anniversary. Got a check in here from work. About 1 million people without power right now in Houston. Well, listen, Matt, y'all be careful over there and take care of all that business. But I'm glad you had a great anniversary. And please tell your wife, Gabby, whose name I butchered yesterday, how proud I am that you all were able to celebrate. But glad y'all had a good time. 10 years is a great accomplishment. It really is. 10 years is a great accomplishment. All right. So, yeah, Scotty Scheffler, fresh out of prison, as our producer Jay Black says, goes birdie, bogey, birdie to start. I mean, I joked today, I want to see him play in handcuffs. That's what I want to see. Like, clearly nothing man-made or God-made in terms of golf course can seem to slow down Scotty Scheffler. So, therefore, can we put him in handcuffs and just sort of see if that, prevents him from succeeding? Yesterday, Thursday, fresh off having a baby, which, by the way, we've been talking about that baby being born for 6 years. Like, we're talking about that thing forever. Like back in the Masters, we're like, you're going to leave the course if the baby's born. Well, the baby was just born yesterday. I feel like we may have jumped the gun on all that. I'm tangled up 1,000 wires over here. So the baby was finally just born. But the point is, first hole back after the baby being born, number one there at Valhalla, Scheffler eagled it. And now he's got 2 birdies out of 3 holes to start here on his Friday round. He is amazing. I mean, he just is amazing. That's a good question. So Jay says, what's a better accomplishment, eagle after having a baby or birdie after having been in the Hooskow? I think I'm going to go jail on this because, listen, I'm not built for jail. I'm just not. And like what people will sneaky tell you is, now I'm guessing they didn't put him in county lockup like Rikers Island. I'm guessing that they didn't put him there. But what people tell you is that jail, like county lockup, is worse than prison. That if you go to prison, that things actually get a little easier once you get out of county lockup for whatever reason. Now, as I said before, I'm guessing they didn't have Scotty Scheffler, like in like the the true, like I'm assuming anyway. They had him in the orange jumpsuit. Maybe they did have him, in there in the gin pop. But I mean, talking to people who know a little bit more about this, they'll tell you that the place you don't want to be is jail. That prison is no picnic, but prison is better than jail. So getting out of jail and like the embarrassment. Do you know how much ribbing he's getting from the other golfers right now? The embarrassment, the whole thing is just shell shocking. Just to step out on the more I think about it, to step back out on the course after all of that and birdie the first hole. I don't care what happens after that. That's amazing to me. That's amazing to me. But yeah, jail is no joke. Now, it'll be Kaylee says it'll be an ESPN 30 for 30. I believe that's probably true. So I think I've told you this before. So I got arrested one time. This is one of the reasons why I don't make too big of a deal about some of these traffic things like that. I got arrested one time. So when I was 18, I was going very, very fast, like for no reason at all. Like I wasn't like drag racing. I wasn't doing anything cool. I was like just seeing how fast I could go. And police was there, pulled me over, and because of like the excessive speeding law, I got taken in. Now, they did not put me in a cell, but they booked me. They did the whole deal there, right there, like that. You're talking about scared straight. I still got more speeding tickets after that, so maybe I wasn't scared straight enough. So I got taken in. So if you go deep enough in the records of like the Hall County, if they still have this, you can probably find a booking photo for me. Maybe I'll get one of those T-shirts that have it on there, like some people do sometimes. But the point is like they did not put me in a cell because they took one look at me and was like, this guy ain't gonna make it. So they just let me sort of stand in the area where like you get the fingerprints and the photo. They just sort of let me stand right there. They didn't put me in a cell. My grandfather was also a policeman, so he was. Oh man, I still remember the look on his face after all of that. And so that's why that probably also colors the way I view this story here a little bit too. It seems like the police is probably overzealous here. It seems like the charges are certainly kind of, because he got charged with like all kinds of stuff. But I don't want the policeman to get fired over this. I don't want to make a villain out of him. It's a high-stress situation. It's probably the kind of job that most police officers do want because it's probably, sort of off-time security type work, which they probably get paid pretty good money for. But even still kind of a pressure situation. There was a fatality there today. I can kind of put myself in the position of the police officer and saying, even if a little bit overzealous, you got to be a little bit stiffed back to do a job like this. Probably took it a little too far. I don't want him fired. I don't want to make an enemy out of him. I think he made a mistake, but he did not intend to wake up today as the number one character on the internet. Did not intend to do that. I'm going to be a little light with the police officer. Obviously, Scotty here, maybe you can make a case that, they were a little too zealous in trying to get onto the course and maybe not being patient enough. That's a stressful situation because he does have a tee time. They're playing for millions of dollars. So clearly there's some stress there on that too. I can sort of see this in terms of both sides of a pretty challenging situation. And I don't necessarily want to make a villain out of anybody on this, but clearly there are about 1,000 different ways that most of this could have certainly been avoided. All right, let's get a couple others here. Let me go to YouTube here for a moment. I had the YouTube pulled up here. Let me see if I can find it back here. We'll get some comments here on YouTube. Then we'll get ready to bounce into a weekend. On YouTube, G. Gray says he was in the same situation. Me, I was booked before back when they he says back when I was in my younger days, as he says, thuggish, drinking, chasing women, and racing. Well, listen, I wasn't doing anything like that. I wish I was doing something cool, but it wasn't anything cool. I was just driving fast. Frank Patterson says, any word on Andrew Paul about where he may end up? Didn't he announce that he's going to Georgia? Did I make this up? Didn't he announce he's going to Georgia State, or is that rumor that he might do that? Maybe we don't know that yet. Maybe we don't know that yet. But I thought there'd been some chatter of that. So I guess I should say I don't know for sure. Let's see what else. Paul Moon says, with our son due in October, I drive so cautiously. Speed limit, hands at 10 and 2, check all my mirrors, check the blind spot, especially when my wife is in the car. Yeah, having kids, I definitely drive. I probably don't do it as much now as I should, but when they were first born or whatever, it definitely changed the way that I drive for sure. Now, change the subject here a little bit. Here's another total confession I have to make. I would say that hopefully I have a reputation of being, I don't want to say like Scotty Scheffler, but, I try to treat people the right way, try to be a nice guy, I try to do things like that. But even with that, it's amazing that I haven't gotten arrested by one of these, like, security guards at a sports venue. It's amazing because stuff like that just sort of crawls all over me when it's like the overzealous, oh, you can't go here. Sir, what I'm going to need for you to do right now is, sir, I'm going to need you to – I can't stand all that stuff. I just can't. And I'm sure that's like sense of entitlement, I get all of that. It's not a pleasant characteristic, but I don't like the security people and their sort of sometimes overzealous ways. Even though they've got a job to do, it's my, I think, responsibility to sort of respect that authority. Totally get that. But my sort of human failed condition is stuff like that does sort of bother me a little bit. It shouldn't, and I would certainly encourage you to follow the rules and things like that. But it's amazing that I haven't gotten in trouble with one of these security guards at one of these things because there have definitely been a lot of run-ins over the years. Let's see what else. Jonathan Aaron says I was a rebel without a cause. I guess that's probably the closest to like any kind of like rebellion I have in my life. But this is also why, like, some people like clutch pearls and fall on the fainting couch every time a Georgia player gets a speeding ticket. Like, given my track record, I just can't do that. I've got too many speeding tickets on my resume to like about a Georgia player getting a speeding ticket. Let's see what else. What else is going on? Frederick Meredith on the subject of the freshman, Ellis Robinson, KJ Bolden. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be fascinating in the secondary. Now, ultimately, I think it somehow works out to be a good secondary for Georgia. Almost certainly it will be. But in terms of like the overall jockeying for position within that secondary, I would say that both Ellis and KJ are coming to play. I do. And they will have some significant snaps coming their way, if I had to guess. I believe you're probably right about that. Let's see what else. Lance D. talking about some other media folks who've had some arrest records. Yes. There's some of that that's out there. Let me go to Facebook here for a moment. Jonathan Aaron says, so it's safe to say that you are not one to come in and talk to the players about traffic violations. Well, I mean, listen, obviously, completely against drunk driving, completely against, not having proper respect for the law. Totally. I mean, obviously, it goes without saying. Like, things that go without saying should be left unsaid. Of course, that's the case. But in terms of, who are these kids driving so fast? Like, we've all been kids, and we've all perhaps driven too fast, and we try to keep that sort of human conversation in mind in all of this. Let's see what else. Bill Sanders and Jonathan Moore says that Scheffler says that one of the cops recognized him, told him it was okay for him, and obviously failed to tell the others. Yeah, almost all of these types. See, here's what I think is sort of interesting about America, is that we sort of gravitate towards the most interesting part of this. Is it the entitled athlete? Is it the overzealous cop? That's the most interesting part of the story. But the actual truth in most of these issues sort of zeroes in on just like poorly managed logistics. Like, most of our problems in life are not some sort of like caricature we draw of some sort of villain. Most of it is just like bad management. And in this particular case, that sounds like what this probably is. It's just very, very poorly planned logistics that probably are to blame for all of this. Yeah, so here are the charges against Scheffler. Second-degree felony assault against a police officer, reckless driving, impeding traffic, criminal mischief, and failure to follow traffic patterns. So there you go. William Camacho says, I'm a law-abiding citizen, and since I've never been arrested, I know the laws and I obey the laws. But there's like a book out there. Some of y'all seen this? It's something about how, like, the average person commits 3 felonies a day. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. There's a book that's out there that's gotten some talk lately about this, that we all think we're law-abiding citizens, but when you start really looking, especially like federal laws, oh my gosh, that if they want to get you, they may get you. Jonathan Moore says, we want to see your mugshot. Honestly, like, I feel like I could use a little more edge to my character. No, I am 100%. Don't take any of this as like an endorsement for not following the law or, following the rules. I mean, I'm totally, whatever. But, like, I don't know. Maybe a little Morgan Wallen style, like, backstory, of where you throw the chair in Nashville the other day or something like that. Morgan Wallen got arrested for that. Is that right? One of those type deals, something along those lines. A little bit of a mugshot type deal. Like, I mean, Scheffler's going to be a lot cooler in a lot of people's eyes because now he's going to have the mugshot. People are probably wearing the Scotty Scheffler T-shirt, the mugshot T-shirt. Maybe a little harder edge to my character wouldn't be such a bad thing. All right, let's see what else. Bill Sanders going out to some spring practice here today at both Griffin and Noonan. So there you go. Jonathan Moore says about the idea of being assault. I mean, obviously, we would take any kind of actual assault very, very seriously. And if we see video that shows that happen, then we would, perhaps revise some of these opinions. But I haven't been presented evidence yet that Scheffler is perhaps guilty of that assault. But obviously, I'm very pro-law enforcement, so I would take any kind of assault on a police officer very, very seriously. We'll wait for any kind of evidence on that. Let's go around the comment sections one more time here. DT says it seems like Scheffler was overcharged. Certainly seems that way. BMAX says he was glad he drove an old clunker in his teens. Listen, here's the deal, though. The car I got the speeding ticket in, and once again, I am not condoning going fast. You shouldn't do this. It was stupid. Like, not was I driving way too fast, I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. I mean, just dumb stuff. But the car I got the ticket in was a 1990 Toyota Corolla. So this idea that, I promise you I wasn't driving some Hellcat or whatever they call these things, these days. This is a 1990 Toyota Corolla. The thing was shaking. So even a bad car can go fast if you push the pedal down hard enough. Randy Hall says, when did the football mags come out? I was actually just thinking about that, Randy. Just thinking about that. I bet you Lindy's assuming. See, here's the thing. It's sort of like, as you get a little older, you're sort of afraid to look at the obituaries because you're afraid of who you might see in there. But, every year I'm sort of afraid of which magazine's no longer being published because every year there's like less and less of these magazines being published. Assuming, God willing, it's still out there, Lindy should probably be on newsstands almost right now. And then Athlon should be there by Memorial Day. And honestly, that's about it these days until Phil Steele comes out in July. Like we used to have like Street and Smith and stuff like that. I don't think they do Street and Smith anymore. And Street and Smith had been known as Sporting News. It was the same magazine. I don't think they do that one anymore. So, hopefully Lindy's is still there. Hopefully Athlon is still there. I'm pretty sure Athlon probably still does theirs. And then we'll have Phil Steele in July, and I know he's doing his. Although I don't really like the Phil Steele magazine as much. I know a lot of people love that. I am not pro Phil Steele necessarily. But Lindy's is probably out now, I bet you. Or at least it's getting very close to. All right, anything else before we're done here? Facebook, one more time. Philip Jordan Wells and Randy Hall talking about Dawgshank Redemption. I do like prison break movies. Any kind of movie involving breaking out of prison, I just find to be really entertained by. Really entertained by. That's a really fun genre of content for me. Breaking out of prison, whether it be, Andy and Shawshank or whatever else. Love prison breaks. Always have loved those. Old-timey movies about breaking out of prison, anything that's sort of breaking out of prison, I always like. That and sort of like train robberies, like cowboy movies about robbing trains. I've always kind of liked that as a genre. Johnny Surf Dog says that Phil Steele will improve your picks. I don't know, Johnny. I don't know if I'm buying that from Phil Steele necessarily. You may be right, though. Mays the Man's, going back to what we talked about earlier, South Carolina among the SEC teams already have fireworks. I think they ran out of fireworks the night they scored 60-plus against Tennessee. So there you go. Half the SEC does fireworks. There's no reason that Georgia can't do them too. Frederick Meredith also excited about both Athlon and Lindy's. All right, anything else? Probably not. All right, we got to go. Good stuff. Y'all have a good weekend. Y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised. The price is promised. You can trust them on all of that, including getting your air conditioning unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs. It's going to be humid, be very, very hot here eventually. So go ahead and get it tuned up to factory fresh specs. RS Andrews online at rsandrews.com. Good weekend. We'll see you back here Monday. DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. We will look forward to talking to you then.